Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, because I think there's quite a few of you out of Europe. So, this is the first of a series of webinar that we are going to present throughout this year or next year. And this year is almost over. And that will address partnerships in general, and more particularly what we commonly call the channel and interaction between vendors and partners, all type of partners. So we will take a moment to introduce ourselves, but before that, what I wanted to say is that this is the first one, therefore it's going to be some kind of an introduction, and we've defined our first webinar as such to present a set of common problems that people encounter when managing the channels or trying to manage a channel for their organization, or on the other side, trying to manage their relationship with vendors. That being said, we will not be addressing these problems today in a sense that we will not provide the solution, but that will come in the subsequent events that we will have. So the next event will be presenting a structured approach to modern channels, because channels have been evolving quite a bit in the past 20 to 30 years. And some of the problems remains that we've always experienced, but there's a lot of new problems that have arisen from this evolution. And we'll talk about this a little bit today and then dive deeper into this in the subsequent events. So that being said, welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. And there is an area where you can comment, and we will be monitoring this very closely. So if you have any question, comments, anything, please feel free to interject at any time. That being said, Carlo is joining me today. So Carlo, would you take a moment to introduce yourself, please?
And then glad to. Thanks, Bill. So my name is Carlo. I'm the CEO of Gorilla Corporation, have been for a great number of years. And I've worked pretty much for 3 decades on building channels for major and startup vendors. So over the first couple of decades, I've really started working with the big vendors to start with, and dealing with their challenges of recruiting, growing, and turning their enormous channels into effective ecosystems that deliver revenue. And then over the last decade, I would say we've had more and more startup clients, Silicon Valley startups and cybersecurity startups that are looking to build a channel and get into the whole culture of channels. And I think one of the things that we'll talk about even today is the whole concept of culture around channel as well, because that's one of the biggest challenges. But I don't want to put the cart before the horse. Anyway, so that's pretty much about me. I live in the south of France currently. When I'm not here, I'm in the United States. I've been in California for the last 12 years. Plan to be back in the States at some time in the course of next year in terms of living back in the United States. Back over to you, Gilles.
Thank you, Carlo. So my name is Gilles Esposito. It's a French name, so don't worry if we ever get to meet and you don't pronounce it right. It's completely okay. I've been in what we call the channel for the last 22 years now, learning from the bottom, from the roles of channel manager and channel development, all the way up to what I am doing today, which is usually organize a channel organization and manage it and build it. I've specialized over the last few years into building such organization for startups and near startup companies, small businesses rather than big vendors, which have attained some level of maturity where I make less of a difference. So this is why I've picked that up. And that's pretty much it for me. I live in Denver, and came from Europe about 22 years ago. And what else to add to this? Oh yeah, on top of that, I participate into a certain number of organizations that are not for profit, but very channel partnerships and alliances centric. So I'm always available for advice and All my contact information is open in LinkedIn. So if you ever need anything outside of those calls, please feel free to reach out. And that being said, let's get it going. So the topic today is about challenges. And what we wanted to do is enumerate a list of common challenges and common issues and problems that people encounter when trying to either build or improve on a channel organization and their daily dealings with their partners, whether, again, as I mentioned, being a vendor or a partner itself, right? So, Carl, do you have a first one you want to throw, or do you want me to start?
Since I sort of mentioned it earlier, should we kick around the subject of culture? One of the things I'd like to say is in order to succeed, you really have to have this culture of being partner-centric. Easy words to say, really hard to implement. I think there are two things. Everybody's been talking about being customer-centric, and of course that's central and pivotal, right? But if one believes that one's organization need not be direct only and has the potential of leveraging channels, it's something that cannot be done half-heartedly. And throughout my career, whenever I've seen catastrophic failures in the channel, it's really due to the fact that ultimately the vendors have not really taken in this concept of developing a culture around being partner-centric. And when I say partner-centric, I really mean, not just siloed in the team that work with the partners, but it's got to be a culture that is really that encompasses the whole company. Every department needs to know that channel and partnerships are like vital mechanism, delivery mechanism for the technology, sales mechanism for the technology, feedback mechanism for the customers. There's so much to be said around culture. I think that's the biggest single point of failure. I don't know if you'd like to comment on that, Gilles. What do you think?
Yeah, and I was going to dive immediately into the second one, which is very linked to that. There's the term partner-centric has been a little bit abused and has turned into some kind of a marketing thing to appeal to the partners, right? Oh, we're partner-centric, we're partner-friendly, all this type of thing. Yet, when you look at the structure of partnerships, mostly within vendors, organization, you realize that it's still siloed the same way as it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, right? So there is that department that usually is attached to sales. That in itself can be a problem, and it's completely isolated, very often completely isolated. And today, what we realize is that developing an actual channel-centric organization comes from the top, has to go down to all the way to the bottom, and it touches pretty much every single department in an organization. Rather than being siloed, it should be interacting heavily with every organization. Yet, it's I don't know if some people will echo this from the audience, but it is not what happened, at least from my experience, and in consulting and also in working for quite a few vendors now. I can tell it's not the case. So this culture that you're talking about, Carlo, is not yet completely achieved. I mean, I have a very recent experience that demonstrates this, right?
Yeah.
Where the partnership organization was always an afterthought, always, from a marketing perspective, from a product perspective, you name it, right? Reaching out to partners and that type of thing to have input that could help you design better product, better solutions, that kind of stuff. It's if you don't inject that as a channel chief or channel leader or whatever you want to call it into the organization, you don't. And the result of this, which is a lot of people will echo this, and I hear this all the time, is that channel organization and the management, the top level of channel organization, usually spend a lot of time, and by a lot of time, I really mean a lot of time, battling internally, where ideally their focus should be outside, talking to partners. They spend a lot of time internally trying to battle for resources, or whatnot, right? So that's I
So how
think
do you go, Gilles, about how do we go about trying to encourage a channel-centric culture in companies that wish to use a channel? Because of course,
yeah.
not everybody needs
Well, we're
but the ones
if
that
we
want
want to
to.
enumerate quite of the few problems that we've decided we would talk about today, we're not going to provide solutions today, right? Again, so that's we're going to try to stay on point and try to make it appealing for you, the audience, to come back to the subsequent events that we're going to have. But just to keep this in mind, that's a big problem. And yes, there are ways to do this, but it's a cultural thing. It's not something tangible. Well, it translates into tangible things, definitely, but it's not something tangibles, right? I always refer to two things when it comes to everything, actually, is aptitude versus attitude. This is definitely in the attitude section, right? It's definitely understanding what it takes to gain the things you need to gain to have an efficient channel ecosystem. And the number one of the things, the number one currency that you have, which is mindshare, is definitely a result of this type of general attitude from a company as a whole versus just the channel department, right? I mean, how many times have I heard going into a meeting with a new partner or potentially new partners of the partners saying, when they realize somebody from a channel organization is in the room, saying, we have the friend of the channel here in the room, right? That's a good thing, right? And what they imply by this usually is that the rest of the people from the organization, from the vendor that are in the room, are not the friend of the channel, right? They're not. The only one that really cares is the channel team, and that needs to change. If you want to get to somewhere better, it needs to change, and for it to change, it has to come from the very top.
It's
And
going to come from the CEO. It's going to come
yeah,
from the CEO, and it's got to be also something that is really understood and accepted by the whole C-suite, right?
well,
Throughout,
even worse than that, Carlo, I've seen this to be such a big problem
right?
with startups and small companies and all that, that the injection of drive to make this happen came even from above the CEO. It came from the investors, where now a lot of VCs, before they invest into a company, they give some directions. And one of the strongest things they talk about today is the partner ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
How are you going to build a channel? Because you can't afford to build like an endless sales team where you have to pay people ahead of time before they start even producing a little bit, as opposed to a channel which is far more scalable when you run it well. So but I don't want to spend too much time on this, right? So
No, it's definitely going to come. It's going to come from the very top, as you say. One of the issues that's always been something that I've come across as a major problem is the CFO not understanding the value of channel. And this is in smaller organizations because, of course, the big ones get it. But in smaller organizations, is justifying the loss of margin, justifying creating a support team to be able to manage these channel relationships. When you have when really it's disintermediated, you don't really get to see to necessarily have the same control that you would on sales forecasts, projections, and even
yeah,
I think in some cases the CTOs struggle with it as well, and CIOs, and the idea of having engineers that are not your engineers deal with the back end and a customer installation. Um, the culture, this culture thing is absolutely, I think, something that we all need to really look out for.
no, it's critical, and it yields so many other things. So I wanted to I mentioned at the beginning that we had a significant evolution of the channel within the last 20 to 30 years, right? And uh, the positive is that more and more organization vendors realize that they need, in order for them to scale significantly, access new markets, be able to have a very good level of awareness. So by awareness, what I mean is that out of 100 deals that are happening where I could play as a vendor, how many of them am I even aware of? I'm not talking about the one I'm going to bid on. I'm talking about the one that I am aware of. I have a very good example of a very large company that did a study about this, right? And they were definitely the leader on their market. That was EMC in storage. And they realized that despite their tremendous leadership in this market, they still were only at peak level at maybe 70% of awareness. So there were 3 deals out of 10 that they never heard about, that they weren't aware of. And after years and years of working on this with a ton of consultants and external companies and whatnot, they all came to the agreement that the only way that they could increase the awareness on the number of deals happening was to increase their channel, number one, and the efficiency of their channel. Because just throwing bodies into your sales team was not going to do it. And just trying to have your marketing team canvas the entire world to get awareness as to everything that was happening was not going to cut it either. The solution they came up with, and they acted on it and became even more of a leader in that space, was to increase both the size and the efficiency of their channel ecosystem. So it's really, really, really important. And that's one of the evolutions. So today we have about, according to the World Trade Organization, and I think it's about 72 to 73% of everything you can think of, business to consumer, business to business, or business to consumer, goods and services sold in the world indirectly. So through some form of partnership. Yet, there is another number that has not evolved. It's the number of failures, right? So everything together, the number of partnerships that are failing is a little higher than 50%. And if you're working in the space and you have a channel ecosystem, I'm sure the 80-20 rule applies to you, where 80% of your revenue is generated by 20% of your partners. What are you doing about the 80 other percent of your partners, right? Why are they not producing? So there's things you can't do that you cannot control, and that's okay. But there are certainly things you can control. And I'm not talking here about targeting an evolution of this number where you would have, suddenly 50% of your partner producing. I'm talking about, if you move the needle even just a little bit, this is going to result in, for a small company, maybe 1, 2, 3 extra deals a year. But for a startup, that's significant, right? And of course, this being expressed in percentage, for a larger company, it will mean more deals, more revenue, and so on and so forth, more success. So the channel is
I think you bring up a really good point there. That I'd just like to emphasize a little bit more this idea of accepting, in a sense, Pareto's law, right? It's kind of it is a little bit like a law of gravity. It's just the way it is, right? But within that, you have a certain maneuverability, as you point out. That you can draw out a little bit more efficiency. I think that around that 80-20, there's like a Gaussian distribution, so it can really, probably, as a bell curve, it can go to 65. 35, for example, or 90-10, and we've always seen many examples where you have situations that are a little bit more on the edges. And you're right. I think it's important to accept that there's going to be a Pareto law in your channel, and also be prepared to actually start acting on that to at least make those numbers as favorable as possible to you.
Yeah, and I've seen the 90-10 quite often, to be honest with you. So anyway, and everybody always talks about, oh, we need to have the right partners, right? Well, this is also something that has tremendously evolved over the past 20 to 30 years, right? When I started the channel, vendors were, cherry picking their partners, right? And partners were very hungry for the few vendors, and I'm saying few with quotes here because there were still a lot of vendors, but everybody wanted to work with the big dogs as a partner, right? And I remember, for example, when I worked for Hitachi Data Systems, I mean, it was like sometimes you would bring partner and your management were questioning you left, right, center to find out why should we work with these partners, and so on and so forth, which are fine questions, right? But this has evolved tremendously today, to the point where I have noticed, especially if you're a small company or smaller company, so in the SMB space and startups, the tables are completely reversed. Now the partners are selecting the vendors, right? And you got to go through hoops now because they already have a big line card. There's a lot more vendors today that are available on the market, whichever space you're in, right? And I'll take the example of what I know, which is cybersecurity. It's tremendously crowded in cybersecurity. It's a nightmare for partners to find the right vendor and based on their strategies and what it is that they want to achieve. And it's evolving weekly. And this yields a problem for the vendors that now they have to come to partners that they want to partner with a lot more. Here's another key term that you're going to hear a lot from us, with a lot better, a lot more channel readiness, right? This is a big problem usually for startups because there is a laundry list out there of about 110 dimensions that altogether constitute roughly 100% of channel readiness. I'm not saying that you need to have the 110 in place before you can start a channel initiative, but there's about 20 to 30 of them that you really need to have squared away and get ready to be able to present and put in front of a potential partner. Otherwise, they're just going to tell you to go pound sand. And they can. That's the terrible thing, right? It used to be that if you were in the antivirus business and you didn't deal with Symantec or Panda or whoever 20 years ago, well, you were in bad shape because you had to work with one of those big guys. Today in cybersecurity, there's no such thing as a company that has a disrupting, quote unquote, disrupting solution and are the only one with that solution. I know everybody claims, as a vendor, everybody claims to be the leader or a leader in something. I've never seen an era where so many leaders in everything. But the reality is that partners have choices today. And I'm talking about VARs, MSSPs, SIs, other integrators, all that kind of stuff, right? Consultants, they have options. And the reality is they don't really need vendors. They don't really need you as a vendor, right? They can go and pick up whoever you want. And that's a shift from what happened 20, 30 years ago, right? And now you have to address this as a vendor, and therefore be more channel ready, which includes a lot of things that we'll cover through the subsequent webinars that we're going to have. And that can be mind-boggling for a new vendor to realize this. So startups create themselves and they put in place their teams and they do everything and all that. And then they hire somebody to help them with the channel. And when you start presenting the laundry list of things you need to do to be viable, to have a minimum viable, I'm not going to say product, but a minimum viable channel approach, they get a little scared, right? It's like, yeah, there's quite a bit of things that you need to be ready for because a lot of the partners you're going to deal with, for example, don't have a marketing department, right? They're going to look at you for support to do joint things with you, joint marketing or NDF or whatever, to be able to launch initiatives to promote your solutions, right? And another problem that vendors have is that tunnel vision, right? When they talk to a partner, they see this partner in the context of them as the vendor and themselves as the vendor and the partner as the partner, and that's it. They don't realize the extension of the line card that any given partners may have, and that's something that is worth studying, because the bigger the line card, and today I do not know any partner out there that does not have at least, and I'm talking about very small one, doesn't have at least 20 vendors on their line card, and that's really a bare minimum. I mean, I know partners that have 250 vendors on their line card. I'm not even talking about the outliers like the Worldwide Technologies, the Sigma, the Sirius, all these guys. I mean, they're those have way more than that. But it's amazing the amount of things that they have. And all those vendors compete which most people on the vendor side and the channel do not realize. They're concerned about who's competing directly with me in the same space, selling the same product at, maybe the same price. Not realizing that their actual competition when you deal with the channel is all the vendors that are on the line card of that particular partner, because you compete for one and only one thing, and it's mindshare. And there's only 8 hours a day, maybe 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day. But that's it. Once the reps at that particular partner have exhausted their pool of time dealing with other vendor on their line card, there's no time left for you. So how do you change that? That is also something that's a specific topic we'll address for like a full-blown session, right? How do I capture and retain mindshare with my partners? Right. Carlo, do you have anything to say to this?
Yeah, no, I love what you're saying, and I'd love to add some color to that. I think so. When it comes to mindshare, it's hard. When it comes to partner recruitment these days, it's harder than it's ever been. So I wanted to tie it back to your comment around Pareto's law. And so, just to sort of put it in numeric terms, if you as a vendor, if you feel that in order for you to sell your product, internationally, you need, or even in the United States, you need 50 partners, maybe one per state, something like that. The number that you actually need, because of Pareto's law, because probably 80 or 90% will not be functional despite the best intentions, you probably need to go and recruit 500. And that is a very, very big number. It's a very big number, especially in the existing climate. And we at Gorilla, we're often confronted by this. And what we've seen is over these last few years, it's just becoming harder and harder to cut through the noise and to support our vendors to recruit so many partners that are willing and able to actually take a proposition forward for all the reasons that Gilles just discussed. So I think that's a very difficult realization, because most people, when they think about partner recruitment, they don't think about Pareto's law. They think, oh, we need 10 partners in order to sell our solutions in our state or in our country, or we need 100 partners. But that really means that you need to go and recruit like 500 or 1,000, and that's a huge number, and it comes at a huge cost. And the ugly side of that is that it's an enormous cost for the majority of which will not be productive because of Pareto's law, right? So how do you go about cutting through the noise and serving them with a value proposition that can really be accurate and appropriate and helpful for them when there is so much competition? And the
Well,
other, yeah, and just the last point I wanted to say is, again, emphasizing what you were saying earlier, is that partners, the channel, it has become a lot more sophisticated. They really know what they're doing. They know what they want, and they will go and find the vendors that they need on their own terms. And they, because of the fog of war that they work under, the amount of information that is propelled at them, they really are, they're not inclined to listen to value propositions coming out of the blue. And the solution that many vendors have, which is, let me recruit a channel guy that has relationships. Well, that only goes so far, because any one person will only have a handful of relationships that can be implemented. And yes, that's a beginning. But then again, knowing a guy at CDW, for example, is a long cry from actually having CDW as an operational partner. What do you think, Shil?
No, I agree. And that leads me to another problem is the fact that the partner ecosystem is very diverse, and being very diverse, that means that, well, that means two things to me. Well, it probably means a lot more than that, but two things. The first one is that a cookie cutter partner program that does not target some specific of partner identity, in their program is, it's not a guaranteed success. Let's put it this way, right? You need to talk to these partners. And actually, I pride myself, and Carl, you know that, from every time I've designed a new partner program for a company, I've done so by going to talk to partners and say, what would be the ideal partner program for you? What would be the topics, or what would be the variables in a partner program that you need to see, right? What would make you tick? And I even ask the question about usually with the relationship that I have to say, and I do that regularly because things change over time. I ask them, like what it is from another vendor that you represent today or you partner with today that is something super sexy that you really like, and as the reverse question is, what are things from other partner programs that you absolutely despise, right? And I try to integrate in mind elements of the first question and eliminate as many as possible elements of the second question, right? It's not a it's not a something that is magical and is going to make the partner program successful. Necessarily, nothing is in what we're going to be saying. Everything is an aggregate of a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but in aggregate, then you're going to have a game-changing approach to your partner ecosystem or to creating a new partner ecosystem. So going back to what you were saying, Carlo, you need to understand before you, just like you do when you're in sales, right? When you're going to prospect a specific end user or potential end user, you're going to study about them. You're going to prepare. You're going to try to understand what they're saying. You're going to try to see what their management is saying on LinkedIn or anywhere else, and so on and so forth, to try to understand what their concerns, their strategy, where they're trying to go, and so on and so forth, right? And you have to do the same with a partner. A partner is, and I usually react very strongly to this, it is not an extension of your sales force. It's not. And the proof of that is that you don't control them. They don't report to you. They do not. You have an agreement where you can do things together, hopefully that will lead to sales, but you do not control partner. And that's a sticky point where people that are usually only saying they're channel friendly or channel centric but are not, is like that loss of control over the sales cycle is really annoying to them. And this is where you start seeing conflicts arising between a direct sales team and the indirect sales team that you have on any given deal, right? But to go back to refocus for a second, you need to understand their business. You need to understand their strategy. You need to understand where they're going and how you can complement this. Dealing with partner today, if you're only looking at, hey, I'm going to give you 20 points or 30 points out of my sales, out of the sales you're going to make out of my product, sorry.
That doesn't count.
That's a bare minimum, but looking only at when the money changes hand at the point of sale stuff is not enough. You have to look at, where is the value to your partner? And yes, those 20 points or 30 points might be part of the value, of course, right? Especially if you sell often and you sell high. But thinking about what I said before, where they don't really need you, they already have product on a line card that are doing this, right? Yeah. You're not going to be a game changer for them. Chances are you're not going to be a complete game changer in their bottom line. Certainly not the first year or the second year, those type of things. So where is the point of value for them, right? And companies like, I'm going to take the example of Microsoft or Salesforce. They've completely understood that, right? Salesforce doesn't sell anything through partners, but they bring like all the sales of their licenses are direct, but they bring their partners on every deal for training, for support, for customization of their solution and all that. All this is done by partners. Microsoft has a similar approach to a lot of things. They sell through partners, but they have a similar approach where for every dollar, to give you an example, of licenses, like Microsoft licenses generated, they generate $4 to $5 of other things that their partners are tackling, right? So think of it this way, right? A little bit. It's like the good old days of, you sell my stuff, I give you 20 points, we shake hands, everything is good, go sell something. Not enough today. It's probably not enough. right? Think of more than that. Where were
Yeah,
we at?
a lot more than that. And I think to add to that, I would say that what's really crucial, I think there's two ways of approaching the channel these days that may work. One is really having a very, very exceptional value proposition around your technology. And that's tough because you have only a very short window of opportunity before somebody else comes up with a similar technology and competes with you for that channel bandwidth. But what we have seen is that if you really have something that is really unique, that actually works, and is provable, um, then that technology diversifier will capture the attention of a partner, and that's the kind of thing that will help you kind of cut through the noise. But then, of course, you need to have a solid partner program. And I'd like to pick up on the point that was made here on the chat by Steve Kazan, around how important it is to research everything up front. Yes, there are so many poorly constructed partner programs, and those end up really, ruining the reputation of channel for a lot of vendors and a lot of partners. Uh, it's all about preparation, and I think that's why Gilles was saying, yeah, in this series of webinars, we'll be talking a lot about readiness, channel readiness, research and channel readiness, and being ready for the channel. The other approach that you have in terms of value proposition, I think, is if you have a product that is similar to others and you think might be better and has some additional points of value against the competitor, that's really hard because you'd have to displace an existing business line that presumably works for the existing partner. And so therefore, the length of time that you've got to prepare to nurture that relationship with a potential partner until such a time that you might be able to win that other, to displace the other competitor, can be an extremely long period of time. It can run into the years, really. And again, I think what we want to do in this session today is to do basically a laundry list of all of these challenges so that we know what we're working with, right, Gilles, in terms of the difficulties that we need to overcome. And also, bursting the balloon that building a channel is fairly easy, and it's a big multiplier, and you're going to get a ton of revenue. Yes, you will, but it's really hard. It has to be done. It's a good thing to do, but it's really, really hard, and there's no easy quick wins. But once you've done it, that's how you become a big guy, in our technology industry, right?
So you give me a good segue to another problem, which is about partner loyalty. But before that, I wanted to address what Steve had said, right, about constructing a successful partner ecosystem. Completely in agreement with you, Steve, about the thorough research, analysis, and alignment with a corporate strategy. Yes, but not only, right? The shortfall of most of the partner programs that I've seen is that I call them vendor programs. I don't call them partner programs because they've been designed by vendors within their own bubble most of the time. As opposed to what I said before, go talk to partners. Go find out what it is that they need and they want. And they will pretty much sketch, the draft of your partner program. If you do that enough with different types of partners, which are the one you should know as you establish your strategy for channels, you should know which type of partners you want to go to. So do you only want to go to MSSPs? Do you want to go to VARs? Do you want to go to, whatever it is? Once you've defined this, go talk to some of those representative of their segment of partners to find out what it is that works, what it is that doesn't work. So yes, on the working internally with your corporate strategy, but go outside, go talk to your partners, or go talk to not your partners yet, and find out what they want. They will appreciate you doing this, by the way, and listen to what they have to say, because in aggregate, they know better than the vendor, usually about any given space. And so I wanted to jump on the loyalty, right? And that yields something really, really close to my heart that I've tried to focus on for the past, 2 decades when it comes to what drives partner loyalty, right? And then I'll talk about the things that don't drive partner loyalty a little bit. But the financial motive usually is number one, right? So that's what I call the relevance. You got to be relevant with their strategy, which is aimed at generating more revenue slash more margin, because they'll live out of margin, and further their their goals, which always at the end will yield better revenue, better margin. But it might be that you have a solution that enables them to enter accounts they've been targeted for a long time, at a low cost point and all that. And from there, because they have a big line card, they will be able to radiate and upsell, cross sell other stuff. And if they see your product as being an enabler of doing this, then you will certainly have a very loyal partner. But there's other elements to that. So I look at it like a stool. I'm making like crappy analogies, so I apologize for that. But it's like a stool, and there's three legs. And if you only have one leg, you're not going to be able to sit very comfortably or step with any stability on that tool. And if you have two legs, it's a little better, but you're not there yet. You really need the three legs. So the first and foremost one is going to be relationships, right? If you have good relationships with the people you want to work with, and that can be a definition of a lot of things, they will tell you what you do right, what you do wrong, what you need to do to make sure that you have better success with them. They will transparently tell you every day. Your relationship with the partner. So if you're a channel chief and you have a team of channel managers or whatever, you need to have people on that team that are very capable of building good relationship, nurturing them, fixing them, those type of things. It's really important, right? Because when people like you, they will want to work with you, and they will help you any day of the week. And every time you'll drop the ball, they will pick it up for you and tell you how to keep it in your hands. So that's really important. And I'm not talking here necessarily about your relationship with a CEO of this partner or this partner. This is good to have. This is important, but it's not where you're going to be successful. Where you're going to be successful is when your sales team and or your partner team is going to be best friend with the sales team of that VAR, that MSSP, and so on and so forth. And just like any other interaction with end users or partners, the more connection you can have within an organization, the better. It's
that actually is something that should be measured, I think, and it's not. But your point, number of connections that you have inside of a partner is so important. And as you said, it's also harmonizing the relationship at the various levels of seniority of management. But the relationship is never, as you say, just a point to point, partner account manager and the partner. It has to go deeper than that.
Oh yeah, it has to go deeper than that. And so LinkedIn came up with a study about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe now, where they now analyzed the number of connection that any salesperson or partner management person had with their counterpart in the company they were working with, either end users or partners, and came to the conclusion that the one that were the most successful had on average 7 connections on average, right? The company I was working for at that time had 1.7 connection. Like the salespeople had knew 1.7 person for each and every one of their customers. The partner managers about the same thing, right? The result of that is that when that 1.7 person leaves the company, you have nothing left in relationships, right? You're done. And I've seen dramas around this. I've seen, like, in the sales space mostly, not in the channel space necessarily, but in the sales space, I've seen dramas resulting from this, right? Where your best buddy was the CTO, and that's the only person you know, and then the CTO got the boot or left to go somewhere else. Well, guess what the new CTO is going to do? He's going to come with his friends and the people he likes to deal with, right? And that's a big problem for partners, for MSSPs, for VARs, and that kind of stuff, as much as it is for the direct sales team of a vendor. So keep an eye that relationship is one of those pillars that I'm talking about. The other one was relevance, into aligning with their strategies and making sure that you fit into what it is that they're trying to achieve. But for that, you need to talk to them and you need to understand that. not just pitching your program and say how much money they're going to make out of the 20% you're giving them. And the last one is so often overlooked, it's scary. And it hasn't changed in the past 2 decades at all. It's the ease of doing business. If you're complicated, if it's difficult for them to do business with you, to place an order or to get an approval for an extra discount, to validate or to get a opportunity registration approved or anything like this dance is not going to last long. And the smaller the partner, the faster it's going to go, because they don't have the teams to take care of all that, red tape or the time it takes. If you like to sign a contract with a partner, it takes 2 months, which I've seen very recently, or more. They're not going to just wait for you. They're going to move on and do something else. And the risky part of this, the very risky part, is that if your product or your solutions play in a space for which they do not have already a vendor, so they do not have one of your competitor, and you've convinced them that it's a building block of their goals and strategies, and that it's going to help them get faster and better at what they're trying to do, but you're too complex to deal with, they're going to replace you. They will find one of your competitor and they will go to that competitor, because now they have a test for the solution you're putting on the table. It's useful to them. It complements what they already do. They like it, but you're too hard to deal with. They're going to go find someone else to do it. So thank you for having introduced your competitors to that particular partner or set of partners, because you were too complex and too hard to deal with.
And that's part of being partner centric, really, from the start, having that partner culture. The very reason why I'm losing my hair at this point in my life is not just my age. It's also because I'm confronted with this type of situation day in, day out, right? So often with vendors, the first question I ask is, can I have a look at your partner agreement? Because that's where it starts going wrong. I have seen so many partner agreement situations where maybe a partner value proposition is beautifully built. The partner program is pretty good, okay, as well, but just getting to that point of recruitment and onboarding can completely deflate and take the fun out of it. I've seen that happen too many times. Either the legalese on the partner agreement is abstruse, or it's very vendor oriented in terms of it's really one-sided, and all of these things will really have a major morale issue on building up the relationship in the first place. Then comes the actual onboarding process, and again, that's something that is generally broken that is often broken. I can't say generally, but I've seen it happen so often that it really hurts all the time, because again, it completely takes away the good intentions out of the relationship that you're trying to build with a partner. So yeah, absolutely, ease of doing business with it has always been spoken about as something that is of primary importance, but it's not.
Yeah, and it was fun. It was really fun, Carl. I remember I used to work for a big distributor, Avnet, which became Tech Data. I wasn't working on the IBM side, but at Avnet we had like a big amount of revenue with IBM as a distributor, about 3 billion a year, and they're just the onboarding part of becoming a partner of IBM was so complex that I remember we had a team of 85 people, if I remember, just to manage the paperwork to help the partners.
Yeah,
because the partners couldn't do it by themselves. It was too complex, too difficult. 85 people to do that. So 3 billion. That's diluted, but still. And if you look at IBM today, so I've run partnerships with IBM over the past 6 years now, and they've completely changed. They completely understood the problem that they had, the red tape problem that Big Blue had, right? And they've leaned out all their processes, and their ability now to be nimble and all that is rivaling what some smaller companies can do. it's so kudos to them for having done that. It's not, fully perfect. It never is, but they've understood that, because they had issues, and their partner had issues with like trying to place orders or even just to sign up to become a partner, and that kind of stuff was way too complex, right? I've had discussion with Google recently about that as well, because they have a partner program that is extremely complex, and very, very hard to understand, for onboarding vendors and or resellers, for that matter. So it's really, really important. You got to make sure that you make their life as easy as possible, because that will pay off.
I
And
agree.
that, yeah, but I want to echo on some of the things you said earlier, right? And going back to the channel readiness, and some of the thing I said, right? The relationship usually between a vendor and a partner are going to be at the higher levels, right? The executive suite level. And then success will be defined when rubber meets the road, which is the salespeople at the partners, right? How much do they want to pitch your thing? Well, this is not entirely true. One thing that is very often overlooked, it's getting better, but it's very often overlooked, are the technical team, especially the pre-sales people at partners, right? And vendors do a lot of spiffs for the salespeople, right? Or they try, because spiffs are less and less accepted. But they do a lot of incentives and this and that are targeted at the salespeople. So it's just anecdotal what I'm going to say, but it can have a big impact. One advice that I have is like, focus on the SEs, focus on the system engineers, the pre-sale system engineers, right? Because those people will vet your technology, number one thing. And if they tell their reps, don't bother with that, the reps are not going to bother with that. I guarantee you that. And there are companies I know that are where the reps are completely hiding behind the SEs for everything that is put in front of their customers or their prospect. And so if you don't appeal to these people, and I'm not talking only incentives here, I'm even not talking about incentives at all. Like, you got to have a language, and you have to have your technical team, your product team, your engineering team engage as a vendor, engage with these people so they can vet your solution, and then you have to train them, right? Don't just send them the book and say, hey, everything is in there, or give them a license and say, have fun and play with it. You have to make them excited about this, because they will influence their own sales team into pitching or not your solution. So,
Jill, I'd like to pick up on something that a comment we have here from Este Preciado, which I think is an excellent comment, and it's about strategic alignment, and finding partners, working with partners that have that strategic alignment with you, and how crucial that is. So I think what we can log today is that should definitely be in our laundry list of issues and challenges with the channel. Is there is often lack of alignment, and nobody really looks at the strategic corporate alignment between the vendor and the partners that they work with. With regards to what we've done in the past, that kind of was helpful. And again, you mentioned IBM. It was an IBM program, which lasted a very, very long time, and it was all about building partner ecosystems. And there, what we were doing was that we were seeking out the most effective complementary partner relationships in a peer-to-peer, partner-to-partner type ecosystem. And we were seeking out partners that had similar strategic objectives to the IBM partners that we were meaning to be supporting, right? And so, again, it's all about research and taking the time to go through let's say a funnel process to get to the very partners that really would form that very good strategic fit. Now, sometimes those partners might not be the partners you expect. They might be completely different. They might even not be, a VAR or an MSP as you might expect. It might be something a little bit different. And that's what's happening these days. The ecosystem is broadening, and it's opening up beyond the notions of what was regarded as channel before. As a channel becomes wider, and it includes also non-transacting partners and so on. But definitely, I think the idea of actually making putting real focus on a future session around how do we go about um, making sure that the partners that are brought into the ecosystems are the partners that have the right strategic outlook, not just that they sell products in a particular market. It's got to go
Mhm.
beyond. How would you comment to
Absolutely, and it all starts by the strategy. And as you know, a couple people, Steve and Este, mentioned in the comments here, it's important to have this initial alignment, but an initial sound strategy that encompasses what you just mentioned. It is not just a little widget that you add to a company or organization, right? Partnering, it's critical, it's important. And when you look at the company that succeed, they usually have a better partner ecosystem than the one that don't or succeed less. But there's another. Before we have 4 minutes before we split, I wanted to talk about the last one, which to me is important, especially when it comes to, again, smaller organization, right? Because bigger organization have understood that, and when you look at their partnering structures, it you know that they've understood that, right? But maybe it took them 2 decades to get there, but they've achieved it. Smaller companies, again, and the notion of widget that I was talking about. Oh, we have a partner team, blah blah blah. It has to do with as you're a smaller company, or as you're about to launch your startup or whatnot, and you really decide that you're going to plan the channel seriously, and become that channel friendly slash channel centric organization, which will pay off every time it does. To which level of success, that depends on which level of centricity you have in the partner world. But what is the one of the things is the most overlooked is the amount of resources, and that includes budget, but the amount of resources you need to secure, put on the table to build that team, that partner team, and all those different things that are going to constitute your channel readiness, or the baseline of your channel readiness. Let's not get too crazy here about having like a perfect level of channel readiness from the get-go. That never happens. And even if you're willing to do it, the budget necessary to do those kind of things is really, really important. But Excel and one guy in the back of a room going and recruiting partners without any support, any onboarding strategy, any training capability, any of those things is not going to cut it. It's going to take you a long, long, long runway for the plan to take off, and that's a problem. Usually, when and I that because we do it together, Carlos. Sometimes we work with VCs and that kind of stuff. When I look at the business plans of most of these company, the word partner is not there usually. So budgeting for it and preparing the resources and stating clearly to your investors what it is that you need and all that is very often missing. Luckily, some of those investors are coming back now and saying, "Hey, you missed the spot here, and you're not talking about your channel ecosystem. How come?" And so it's shifting a little bit, but it's something really important that you need to factor from the get-go, not as an afterthought, as I mentioned again. So granted, this is extra budget, this is extra resources that you need, but there are solutions for them, right? I mean, Gorilla is a good example. So in all disclosure to the audience, I've worked in 2 different capacities for 2 different companies, leveraging the services of Gorilla, because I came into these companies stating clearly before I even joined what it is that was needed to build a good partner ecosystem, or to start a good partner ecosystem. And at the recruitment dance phase, everybody was nodding and saying, "Oh yeah, no problem, of course we're going to do all those things," right? And once you're in the organization, you realize that this is a lot of BS, and you don't get the resources you need to build this internally, which are very costly. Fortunately, so I'm doing a little bit of a commercial pitch here, there are companies, quite a few of them, like Gorilla, that are capable of helping, especially at the onset, but even later. So at the onset of a program, to help you, first of all, make sure your program is not completely delirious and has any chances of success, but also complement you in building that channel readiness in various aspects of things, right? From identification of partner profiles to recruiting partners to onboarding them to channel marketing and so on and so forth. And Girl has helped me twice with this in various level of success, but success is the key word here to achieve this. And it's so you have options, right? You don't need to necessarily build a team of 5 people from the get-go and pay those people a lot of money and all that. You can go by little steps, and we'll present again this structured approach to channels on the next iteration of this series. But you can leverage companies like Gorilla that are very reasonable from a budget perspective to start building or to start combining those building blocks you need to have an approach to channel readiness that makes sense and that is properly prioritized for you to start developing an ecosystem that's going to be as quickly as possible, resulting in a positive ROI from your investment standpoint, and then scalable so that you can become a channel-centric or a partner-centric organization. So you have options.
Right? All right, Bill. Well, thank you for that.
Thank you for the plug. You need to think of it from day one, not as like, oh, it would be cool to have a channel ecosystem. Let's do something. That doesn't work.
Thank you, Gilles. Yeah, and thank you everybody for coming on this session. It was a lot of fun to have these conversations. I look forward to the next in the sequel.
So thanks everybody for